You're listening to Energy Amplified. I'm your host, Marlisa McLaughlin, on Green Ink Radio, an experience for the curious mind. I'd like to welcome Kimberly Schipke on Energy Amplified today. She is one of our planet's bright and brilliant minds, paired with a very sincere and compassionate heart. Kimberly is a biomedical engineer, and she has research experience in tissue engineering, cellular and tissue mechanobiology, medical device design. She's presented and written and taught across the planet from Brazil to India and far beyond. I hope we get to hear about some of these great adventures of Kimberly's. She's a co-founder of Bulldogs for Heart Health, which is a nonprofit outreach devoted to educating youth in her home state of Mississippi. And her website, biofieldlab.com, is not only a destination for those of you who are seeking support for health and well-being, but it's a gold mine of cutting-edge information that will blow your mind and enhance your overall feelings and responses to what's going on in the world. So it gives you a whole new direction for a natural approach to your health. So welcome, Kimberly.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's so nice to have you. So I would love to start the interview by asking this question. When in your youth did you first realize that you had this strong desire to pursue a career in science?
I was actually in the 7th or 8th grade. I read an article where it said that women didn't excel in math and science. And I had just won the math award in the 7th grade. And I was like, who says girls can't excel in math and science? So I decided to I just really focused. And it's one of those things where sometimes things will stick to your brain and things won't stick to your brain. So history, it just like I could feel my brain and delete, just kind of forgetting who fought in what war. But science, it just really fascinated me, the things that you could learn. And then engineering, I grew up in an engineering family. I've got a brother and sister who are both mechanical engineers, and it's just kind of the way that we think. So I knew I wanted to go into biomedical engineering, and I've just gone from the physics route towards medicine.
Oh, that's beautiful. It's so interesting to have dialogue around the family table. So some of your discussions during dinner were probably a lot different than in my home.
Yeah, my brother-in-law is also a mechanical engineer. So we've got about 4 sitting around the table around the holidays. It's kind of
oh, wow.
interesting. And one of my brothers, his wife's name is Penny. And so they're like, do you feel like the Penny off of Big Bang Theory? She's like, yeah.
Totally. That's great.
Yeah, great.
So talk about the biofieldlab.com. I want to just go there first, because when I saw that you were launching your website, I was so incredibly stimulated. Like I stopped everything and I really just poured over all of these different fields that you have offering on your website. And not only that, but it just made me so incredibly curious to see how much you've done in a very short career span. So I would love to walk us through your website as we go through this.
Well, one of the things that got me into the biofield was my first job after getting my master's in bioengineering was overseeing clinical trials. And from that, just seeing the chemical model and how that was working, I was just like, this isn't the way to go. And, it was obvious. And so I started studying the biofield. I had an acupuncture treatment that blew my mind, and I started studying the biofield. So my website's pretty much a lot of different technologies that I've looked through and researched and have been able to see that this measures part of the biofield. So one of the technologies on my homepage is medical thermal imaging. So if you think of the biofield as the space surrounding the body that's in the electromagnetic spectrum, but out of the visible spectrum, thermal imaging was one that I could really wrap my head around, being able to see the heat that the body's giving off that's outside of the visible spectrum. So I really started there and started studying Qigong masters and seeing how people who work with energy and move energy, how you can measure that on, by a camera. How can we start showing and seeing how this works? So after overseeing how clinical trials work, and all the rules and regulations involved in clinical trials, being able to set up a lab that follows all those same rules and regulations that the FDA has regarding research, and be able to use these tools and technologies to study a more physics-based approach to healing.
Now, you said that it was obvious to you that the chemical side of things weren't working. How did you see that obvious? Because it might not be obvious to some people who depend on the chemical healing process. So what was it about that for you?
Well, most studies, it was the placebo. I kept seeing the placebo, and seeing how they rigged up the whole study to take the power of belief out of the research. Because if somebody believes that it's working, and then if the doctor believes that it's working, if they both believe that it's working, then it'll work even better. So they have to so taking out the brain power, I think, was part of it. And then also seeing, as a woman, seeing that they're doing mostly men in the study, because women have hormones that go up and down. And so the data goes up and down, and that doesn't help them get this pharmaceutical through. And so seeing, okay, well, you're giving that to somebody's grandma. You're giving that to who? And you haven't even studied the population correctly. So I was just, there was a lot that it just wasn't. And then seeing how many people listening over and over, how many people died in the study, how many people were hospitalized, their face twitching, tongue swelling, like those ends of the commercial. Like I had that for hours, 6 hours every Tuesday and Thursday. I was just like, I can't believe this is happening. So I was like, chemistry is based in physics. If you understand physics, then you can get chemistry. So and Albert Einstein even said physics trumps chemistry. So I'm like, we need to go the physics route. And so I had met Dr. Jay Shim, who was using green lasers up in Boulder. And so I was just like, lasers, coherent light, that's fascinating. And so I started to look into that more, and into Tina Caru's work, where she worked with cells and cell cultures, and she would shine coherent light onto cells and see how they would respond. They would replicate under red lasers. And so that's why a lot of this new facial rejuvenation, they're putting themselves in front of this red light, and that's because it'll cause your cells to replicate. Or people who have lost their hair, like wearing these little headbands that will stimulate hair growth.
I really want to emphasize here how natural this is. It's light. We're not doing anything invasive, and we're stimulating cellular regeneration. It doesn't get any more natural than that when and that's what our bodies do. I mean, our body heals itself. We're a self-regulatory unit. So you're appealing to that in your work, how did you find out about the biofield? When I learned that word, I mean, I had previously understood it as an energy field, but I wasn't with scientists, so most people called it the aura, and they didn't know what it was. So how did you find out about the energy field and then later come to actually work and study and research in the biofield?
I first learned about the biofield I went to a conference called the International Society for the Study of Subtle Energy and Energy Medicine. It is a mouthful, but it's ISSEEM is the kind of acronym for it. And it was held in Colorado. And so there were brilliant scientists from all over the world. We had Dr. Beverly Rubik, who wrote the biofield hypothesis. I was able to meet her and listen to her speak and her presentations, and Bill Tiller, and just some Claude Swanson, who wrote the book Life Force, The Scientific Basis. He's an engineer, so he was speaking my language. I'm just reading through this about torsion fields and Kozarev's work, and I'm just like, he's just blew my mind. I would say that Claude Swanson's book Life Force, The Scientific Basis, is the textbook for the biofield. It's written by an engineer for engineers and for lay people as well. You can read through it. But that was really my spark of like, wow, this is, really brilliant work.
Now, speaking of sparks, we're working with the electromagnetic field. That is, can you define the biofield and how it functions and operates for new people to this subject, and also just to enhance and excite the rest of us who know about the biofield?
So the biofield is that energy that's, like I said, it's outside of the visible spectrum. It would be I think of it, if you go down to, as above, so below, if we think about it from an atomic perspective, you've got an electron cloud around. And so this would be kind of our cloud that's around our body. It's really a blueprint that the body, kind of builds itself off of. It's where our energy comes from to be able to move things along.
And so you started with the thermology.
Yeah, I started with thermography, and I went down that rabbit hole. And then I met Eileen in 2011, and she was using tuning forks. Eileen McCusick, she developed Biofield Tuning, and she was using tuning forks to tune the body. So here's coherent sound. So then, and again, my physics brain is like, wow, I'm hearing this. So she would bounce sound off of the body, and she would interact with my biofield, and I could hear it go really sharp. I played piano, clarinet. I've been music's been part of my life. So hearing it go really sharp, and then hearing her ask me about certain ages in my life, I was like, oh my gosh, that's totally what age 14 sounded like.
So can you explain how they know about how we know at age 14? Like the biofield goes out a certain amount of feet.
Yeah, so Eileen has found that the biofield extends about 5 or 6 feet off of the body. And just like the Earth has a magnetosphere and the sun has a heliosphere, there's this double charged membrane at about 5 or 6 feet away from the body. So when you bring a tuning fork in there, it'll start to interact with that charge. And so you can hear a lot of information just at the edge of a person's bubble, if you will, and how they interact with the world. So this can hold information. What she's found is inherited patterns. So things that you would be born into this lifetime with. Energenetics is what we call it. So the energy of your genes. So if there was a propensity towards depression in your family, you'd hear this kind of this sadness that you inherited. It's not really yours. It's something that's in the bloodline. And then moving in the middle of that plasma membrane, she's been able to find information related to gestation, or when you're plugged into your mom. So that umbilical cord's like an electrical cord. So what your mom's feeling, you're feeling. So if mom had a really stressful pregnancy and all of these calamities happened, while she was pregnant, then you were feeling all of that and charge from your mom. And then moving in even closer with the tuning fork, if you had a really traumatic birth, if you were emergency C-section, you had the cord wrapped around your neck, then you would definitely hear a change in tone at that inside edge of the field. And then as you move in closer, it's like rings on a tree. So every time that you go around the sun, you get another ring. So when you start to move in, it's like a needle on a record. You start at this inheritance, gestation, birth, and then you start to move in and find where you hit like an electrical charge. And then eventually that electrical charge, and so you just calculate it. How old are you? And then it's halfway, quarter of the way through your life, a third of the way, and you just do some math, and you're like, okay, so this is about a third of the way through your life. I'm hearing all this electrical charge here. And different emotions can be found in different areas. So sadness would be off the left side of the heart. And so if they had a really traumatic, sad event that happened halfway through their life, then I'm going to come in there, and it's like broadcasting what it sounds like. It'll sound like a sad song on a radio, like that. And so just by bringing that tuning fork, it's an adaptogen. So anything that's too low, it's going to bring it back up. If it's really high and anxious, it'll help bring it back down. So it can help keep you in that kind of more natural, neutral tone. So then as that relaxes down, it's like you're hitting a high pressure system or a cloud in their field. And eventually that just kind of melts and dissolves, and you can bring the tuning fork and bring that charge back in, and you just keep moving through the field, finding areas of charge until you can take that charge that they've emotionally let out into their field. And this is their cloud. All of their memories are stored in this cloud, so they can reference, all of our life is filtered through these different memories. So being able to get all of this charge out of the field and back into center, this is back into circulation. Now this electricity is in the core. It's like a tree has all of the water all in its core, and that's what gives it its strength. Being able to bring all of that charge into this central channel, then it can go back into circulation and do whatever it needs to do. And so with this work, a lot of people feel a lot more grounded, a lot more centered, a lot more focused, and not phased by the world. So it's like, oh, wow, that used to upset me every time somebody did this thing. I'm sitting here and they're doing that thing and I don't feel charged at all. That's amazing. And so
because
then you respond differently. Exactly. You're like, I don't have any charge towards that.
And it's really a really beautiful way. And so you can actually have, even though it's subtle energy, you can have physical detox from this, even though you might not even think anything's really happening at the time because it's so gentle.
Oh, definitely. I have seen some, because I'm a teacher, I teach biofield tuning. I get to see a lot of sessions, in a short period of time. In 3 days, we're tuning 10, 11 people. We're getting to see this process over and over again, and then hear what was that like for you the next day? And we had this woman, she was a little bit overweight, and there was a lot of stress and trauma in her field, and especially around her hips, around frustration, things she wanted to be doing but wasn't able to, get traction and to move forward with those things. And so once we got all of this charge of all of these times that all these frustrations have come up into her life, we were like, how are you doing the next day? She said, well, I didn't sleep at all. I spent the whole night peeing. And she stood up and she pulled out her waistband, and it was like 4 or 5 inches of water weight that she was able to lose. And you could tell it in her face how much. Wow. And so a lot of this tension, is really holding these water molecules. And so just by releasing the tension, then the cells relax and they can let go of that water. And so, you can really keep the system really nice and toned.
It's absolutely fantastic way to regulate and maintain great health. Now, you have worked with FAME, the Foundation for Alternative and Integrative Medicine, and still do. You participate. The mission for FAME, I love this, is to create a revolution in worldwide healthcare. And that's where I feel that your passion moves you forward through all of this and brings out your creativity and your aliveness. And it probably was responsible for your also your Bulldogs program. So could you please speak to those two? First, FAME. Tell us about your participation with FAME.
Yeah, so FAME is it's a volunteer position. It's something that I've volunteered to do. I'm the International Resource Coordinator. So when I travel to different conferences around the world, I'll write up some of the speakers and what's happening, what's kind of the latest, greatest in energy medicine. I've also will visit clinics, and I'll see some incredible clinics. I saw great clinics in Budapest and Hungary. If my family gets sick, we might go to Budapest.
Good, huh?
But that's what I want to change. I want things to be able to be open and to be free here in the States, to be able to try, and use what works. There's also an incredible clinic in India where 4 or 5 different people will individually do an analysis, whether it's your Ayurvedic pulse diagnosis, you'll see a nutritionist, you'll see a regular doctor, you see several different specialists, and then they come together based on all of the information that they've separately gathered. They come and decide what is the best course of action for you and what diet should you have, and so it's such a really comprehensive group approach to be able to treat somebody rather than, just one person's input. So I like to write up different places that have been inspiring and are trying new things around the world.
And again, totally natural and collaborative. So you're not just dependent upon one person's entire experience, who may actually be having a bad day on the day that you have one of your most important assessments to be looked at. So you have this group connection.
Yeah, and the lady who did my pulse diagnosis, she blew my mind. I was like, how do you know my life? I asked her that. I was like, you got all of that from my wrist? How did you know? Like, she would just completely, she had my number. She knew exactly what was going on with me. So,
how did she answer you?
She said, this is just, an ancient technique. They've been doing Ayurveda for how long? It's incredible. So, they know their stuff. And, that's why I think these alternatives, that they've been medicine. I don't know why it's an alternative. Pharmaceuticals is an alternative to what they have been doing for centuries.
Right.
Basically. Like, we shouldn't have to prove Ayurveda because they've done it. They're still doing it and it's still successful. That's ridiculous. Same thing with acupuncture. It's been a long pharmacopoeia, according to Bible Hub. That's definition is sorcery and witchcraft. pharmacopoeia, which I think that's very strange for them to get their name from that.
Well, it is true. I mean, this is the energy medicine timeline goes back 40,000 years to shamanism, and we have recorded. Can you imagine way back in prehistoric times? I mean, you find the natural ways to help support when you need repair. So all throughout time, it's just been a gradual practice of ancient wisdom and electricity, the torpedo fish for pain relief. Just at the 1 AD is when that happened. And so moving forward, it took quite a while for us to circle around it again because we got sort of derailed with the whole chemical pharmaceutical profitable piece to it.
Totally. And I think the other thing that we stopped doing over time was, singing and dancing together as a tribe, stomping around fires and dancing as groups and being able to sing. Dancing, you can stretch and move out so many muscles that if you just sit there at a computer all day, they're just going to get really tight. If we had a weekly, let's gather and stretch and move, then a lot of back pain is going to go out of there. And it's a really fun way to be able to exercise and stay fit, and being able to sing and be in harmony with how many people, what that does for the soul. I mean, I think that could heal so many things of just feeling that unity of a group and community, because without that, it leads to addiction.
Well, absolutely. That's just what you just said. You spoke to one of my favorite aspects of where you come from in your life perception, because you're not just a scientist that has a very focused perspective from that language and that perspective. I mean, even your dinner table, you guys have a certain language you speak, but you're talking about unity and just tribal joy and how to get the energy flowing, because it really is. Let's get right down to basics. This is really all about energy and energy medicine. And perhaps we need to find a new term for medicine, because we're still in our mainstream language very connected to medicine and the power that gets handed over to the Western medicine paradigm, where we go see a doctor and everything's in their hands. And it's not a naturally generated instinctive process of saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to take my shoes off and go outside and walk around and stretch, and maybe I'll even stomp if I feel like it.
Yeah, a little acupressure for the planet. That's what I think.
Oh, I love that. That's good. And also, I love the multiverse. Talk about the multiverse.
Yeah, the multiverse. So I studied with Dr. Elizabeth Rauscher, who's a nuclear and astrophysicist. I went and lived with her for a month. She had developed an external pacemaker to help set the heart using an external electromagnetic field. So this girl from Mississippi was very interested in external pacemakers. And one of her specialties, she wrote for her dissertation about the unified field theory. And so she started talking more to me about the multiverse. And that just helped expand my mind a little bit more. And I was like, of course, the universe is just one verse. And you need multiple verses, can make up. And so it's being able to expand, your cosmological expanse to be that much bigger. So, instead of having conversations with the universe, I'll have conversations with the multiverse. I'll say, I love the multiverse and the multiverse loves me, feeling that energy that's able to go out and ripple back. What you put energy into, will come back to you. So that's kind of been an interesting point to explore, is the multiverse. I'm definitely grateful she's opened my mind to that.
And you had the opportunity to really be at her side, and also some other really powerful and forward-thinking women as apprentice and colleagues. Can you speak to those?
Absolutely. I was also asked, Valerie Hunt, who wrote the book The Infinite Mind. She did some of the first research into the chakras at UCLA in the 1970s. And so this was measuring microvoltage changes along the nerve plexus, along the midline of the body. So everywhere that we have a nerve plexus along the center, along that vagus nerve, there's also a chakra in the Vedic text. So what Valerie was doing was she's putting these sensors on either side of the chakras and then measuring what they would consider called the noise in the signal, and seeing what changes would happen when energy healers would work on a person, for example. And so her book, Infinite Mind, really goes into that a little bit more. But when I came in to be her assistant, she was telling me that they've been able to redesign the equipment, because in the 70s, those sensors, they stopped making them. The machine stayed at the university, so they kind of cannibalized it for parts as they needed it. It was kind of in a cupboard, and they just take a valve or take whatever they needed as needed. So she hadn't been able to recreate it. And so years later, I think it was 2013 or 14, she gave me the name of an engineer who happened to be living, near where I was in Colorado, and we met up. He trained me on the system, and I was able to go to India and do some research at the World Peace Center on Kundalini. So we had a Kundalini master come and do some research there with that. So that was really great.
That's available on your website?
Yeah, the paper that I wrote is available on my website. It's in my About Me section.
Which is absolutely beautiful and inspirational. And you also have some photographs, I believe. I think that I remember seeing you working in India.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we had to, because the system's so sensitive. You can't be in you can be in a lab where there's computers and Wi-Fi and a lot of power and electrical, because it would just wipe out everything. All of the noise of those systems really just wipe out our subtle senses. So we had to hike up these stairs and get away from any power lines, and we did the study outside up a hill. And then I forgot my key for the software.
Oh,
so
no.
I go back down and run back up. It was really quite funny, like skipping a step going back up the stairs. But yeah, that was a really interesting experience.
It sure was. I don't want to leave behind Bulldogs for Heart Health.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful, special story, and I know it's really dear to you. So let's hear about that.
Yeah, so that Mississippi was number one in cardiovascular disease. And when I was in college and learning more and more about it, for my master's, I had to go and get hearts that were from a pig heart. So we would have these extra hearts that we would put in formaldehyde and then bring them to schools and, dissect them for kids for these science classes and show them how the heart works and the heart valves and heart strings. And so we'd always have a student who would say they wanted to be a cardiologist, after the class. We would make trail mixes with different types of food that are really good for the heart. And, in Mississippi, there were a lot of kids who had never even had pumpkin seeds before in their entire life. And so that was just beautiful to watch them do that. Also, Profile Products, they make a clay in different colored clay. So they have a Red Sox red and a Brewers brown. So the kids, they donated a lot. And so we were able to take water bottles and they could fill up and make different colored, clay from different of their favorite sports teams and put it into the weight, put the top on it. And then they would draw their spelling list with the weights. And so we were able to just go into schools and give kids more information about heart health. And we were able to teach all of the third graders in Starkville, Mississippi. So that was really exciting and really fun. So we also organized a fitness challenge at the university. So we had a challenge for people to lose weight. Winner got a Wii Fit. That tells you how long ago that was. That was like a big thing at that time, was a Wii Fit. So yeah, that was really fun helping to organize that and trying to get the knowledge is power. Like I said, we want to get the word out and educate people, inspire them.
And the course of those children's lives most likely dramatically changed. What a gift, to inspire them to enjoy and feel a desire to learn and to participate and to take care of themselves instead of it being placed before them in a hard surface way, so to speak, where they didn't have their energy flowing. I mean, you get their energy flowing, get their curiosity going, and so many wonderful things come from that.
Well, I remember when I was a kid at Joyner School here in Tupelo, and we had career fairs, and we were able to go and see doctors, and they showed us what they did, and it was really like a fun, interactive, dynamic thing. And that was like, meeting that doctor when I was 7 or 8 years old, that, put something inside me that maybe was part of that magnet that made math and science want to stick to my head, because that was really like, that did something to me. So I wanted to make sure that I can keep that going and be in that generation that can show kids and inspire them to want to follow, whatever, draws their attention.
Yeah, that's the gold nugget from the beginning of our interview. Like I could hear there was maybe a little something more than what drew you into the path that you took. So there, I feel like I'm fully satisfied. It feels great to know that, and to know that it came with the help of helping children, because that's just such a fertile mind. Before we have to kind of wind down here, I wanted you just to tell us just a little bit about what someone could expect to go on biofieldlab.com, biofieldlab.com, and scan and read and dive right in.
So we have, like on the homepage, I talk about the different technologies that I have, just kind of a little bit of snippet where you can read through the different technologies that I'd be using here in the lab. And then I have a What is the Biofield, which is a really long explanation, and it starts with electric fields and magnetic fields, but it does start to get more interesting as you start to go down. But I felt like I should start with the particle physics first, basis, where it evolves into the atoms, to the tissue, to the organs, to the whole system. So I tried to work in that way to be able to explain from physics, all the way through. And then biofield tuning, that's where I talk more about that technique I mentioned before, using tuning forks to listen to the field and to work on that level. The green laser, I also have a tab that explains, why green laser, and what got me interested in using that system. Kind of tells my story there. And then I just kind of told my whole story. That's where I have links to some of those FAME articles about my experiences at different clinics around the world, my different conferences that I've attended, services that talks about some of the work that I do, even at a distance with this quarantine. I'm still able to work with clients from all over the world, through the phone. So we just work through the phone, and I use both coherent light with the green laser and coherent sound with the tuning forks to help bring that body to more neutral. So I work on individuals. I work with couples. I love working with couples to try and get some of the charge and the static noise between the two of them a little bit more coherent, so that people can be heard and respected. And then also tuning businesses and things like that. So it goes more into some of the services, athletic teams, things that I work with. And then additional research actually gives more pages and more research into radiation health and safety. Some of the first research they did with EEGs and AM and FM radio, and seeing what happened to our brain waves with that. So you can actually see what happens to your brain waves when they turn on AM and FM radio, and see, how we can be affected from that. And they've known about that since the 70s. So there's a lot of good papers in there. We also have a reference to the Consciousness and Healing Initiative. Shamini Jan and her team there have done incredible work of gathering biofield research papers. So if you want to dive into that, then you can go onto their website and see even more comprehensive, huge, long list of biofield research. They've really put a lot of work into it, and got to give them a shout out for all of that they've done.
That's wonderful. So I know that it's been kind of tough going to really create a hybrid understanding, from going from very orthodox Western medicine with language especially and understanding, to incorporate this new technology we have and the in-depth understanding we have. So it's not just about information so you can learn. It's also the validation behind the things that we sense and we feel and have not had a language to really express and understand. So we've discredited that, and there has gone a lot of our power for self-healing. Yeah. So your website just invites so much validation, first of all, for what you may be feeling out there that you've never had words to describe, and to actually see the research and to see that you've not only just borne witness to a lot of these things, you've created, device and you're working with this technology, and you have a really in-depth understanding. So it's very trustworthy, and it's a wonderful place to get a great foundation And also, you're an incredible healer. I got the privilege of having the green laser treatment with my distance session. And I have to say, the week that followed was just remarkable on so many different levels for me. Yeah.
Yay. Well, I love to hear that. I love that.
And I'm not the only one. So,
No.
So it's fabulous. So I just want to thank you for sharing all of this and for all of this that you've done for our planet and continue to do, and your wonderful open heart, your great smile, and the fact that you're so available and accessible in terms of getting someone to understand and be able to make decisions for themselves in a confident way. It's really important.
Thank you.
It really contributes to this revolutionary perspective on health, and we have a new path before us. So I'd like to thank you for that, Kimberly.
Well, it's an honor and a pleasure. My goal is to, may every step be a dance and every word a song. We want people expressing and living to their full potential and not being afraid to shine. So that's the goal.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yep. We'll get you again another time, I'm sure.
I hope so.
Thanks for tuning in. You can check out our blogs and other great shows on greeninkradio.com. Green Ink Radio podcasts can also be found on iTunes and Spreaker. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. This is Energy Amplified with Marlisa McLaughlin on Green Ink Radio. Wishing you hope, health, and joy.
Green Ink Radio is sponsored by Green Ink Marketing Communications, a full-service agency. They bring your stories to life. Find them at greenink.us.com.